Okay, so we've talked about titles, introductions, and thesis statements. Those are the techniques that have been in place to allow you, the writer, to exercise the proper amount of control and direction over the conversation. That's how academic writing gets done. And one way to think about it is this. Remember that your reader is no more inclined to listen to your voice than the reader is inclined to listen to anybody else's voice, the next three people that come along. And so in the real world, whether you get listened to or not is dependent upon how good you are at the techniques that we're teaching in this class. And, nothing's particularly hard or terribly difficult. It's just a little challenging to practice it and learn it, particularly because you live in a world that doesn't reinforce this kind of clarity of thought and logical approach. If you look at what the political candidates are doing, it's exactly the opposite of what the way a logical, rational discussion should go forward. They know how to do that. Their speechwriters are masters of these techniques that we're teaching in this class. And the reason they don't use them, I think, is because they don't have to, because we don't care. We don't pay any attention, so they don't have to be straight with us or clear with us or devise their ideas carefully for us, because we don't particularly care anyway. It's sad but true commentary, in my opinion, on the American political process. But anyway, the techniques we're teaching you are the techniques that you use to make a logical case for your position so other rational people will believe you. Those poor people out there who believe whatever they're told, we can't help them. So I'm going to put, in this last little video, I'm going to put body paragraphs and conclusions together because they don't take very long to talk about, and then I can be done and get upstairs and to my other computer and get these things closed captioned, which I unfortunately have to do myself, and which takes me a while because I'm such a lousy typist. So, body paragraphs. You've talked about coming to a position of stating your case for your beliefs in your thesis statement. Then in the body of your essay, and you know this, you develop your argument. You don't just say it over and over again, because a smart reader will notice that you're just saying it over and over again, and that's not convincing anyone of anything. You make a case using evidence for your position. And each little piece is what we're calling a body paragraph. And each body paragraph starts with what we call a topic sentence. Think way back to basic grammar. The topic sentence states your position and has a position of attitude. I call it topic and attitude. And there will be an exercise in the forum this week to help you understand what those two things are. But basically, like your thesis statement is a statement of your position for the entire essay, which must be clear and right out there for the reader to see, then your topic sentence is the piece of the idea that's going to be developed in that paragraph, and that sentence limits that paragraph so that you can control that piece of the discussion. And typically, your topic sentence states your position and your attitude, and then there are, in most cases, 3 support points, not just 3 restatements of the topic sentence, but 3 pieces of evidence that show why your position in your topic sentence makes sense to a rational person. Even if they don't agree, a rational person will see that it makes sense. So that's body paragraphs and topic sentences. Again, something that you can practice and get really good at in the next 8 weeks. Finally, conclusions. There are a number of ways to think about conclusions. I like the idea of a mirror. The essay should have a completed shape, like a circle almost, although it's not really a circle, as I'll explain in a diagram I'm going to send you. And the way to conclude the essay is to bring back something from the beginning. Remember, the average reader has an attention span of about 30 seconds on a good day. So by the time you write a 5-page essay, by the time they've finished page 5, they've completely forgotten what you said in page 1. In other words, they've completely forgotten your thesis statement. So one really good technique, and there are several, and you'll see in the conclusions handout that I gave you, there are a number of ways to do it. One of the best is to find something at the beginning in your opening strategy that you can bring back in the end by repeating a word, repeating a phrase, restating an idea, but something at the top should come back at the bottom. Here's a simple example. I once wrote an essay called The Hollowness of Reading, and it was a structural thing talking about how short stories are vessels for ideas, and you don't need to know about any of that stuff. But at the end, to give it that nice shape, my last sentence was something like, a reader can learn that reading isn't hollow at all, but actually full of significance, or something like that. I don't remember exactly what I wrote, but the point was I repeated the word hollow, which attached back to the hollowness of reading, my title, and bam, 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 everything connected in the reader's mind, or that was my strategy. These are strategies. Of course, they don't always work, but most of the time they do, and if you have a strategy, things go better. So all that we're teaching you in this class are these strategies that work most of the time. So think about, in your concluding work you're going to write this week, think about something from the intro, title, thesis, something at the top of the thing, bring it back at the end, which gives a sense of completion and being finished. You could judge this. It's not hard to say, here's what I said at the top, let me say it again at the bottom. That's kind of a no-brainer. Okay, so the last thing is, all of this business, all of these strategies and techniques that you're learning and practicing, these are ways of directing and guiding the conversation. Remembering that your reader is no more inclined to listen to you than anybody else. And so your exercise of these techniques determines whether your voice gets heard or not, which is kind of a big deal. You never want to give the reader a chance to say, so what, who cares? Or I don't have time, don't bother me, not interested. Don't allow the reader's disinterest to take over control. And the way to do that as you're working through your essay is say, continually ask you and ask your peer reviewer, so what, who cares, why is this important? Because the reader will be asking that question all the time. And the moment they can't find an answer to who cares about this stuff, they turn off and they're gone, and you've lost the ability to communicate. You've lost the possibility of communicating with that stranger on the other side of your words. That's pretty important. That's a pretty big deal. And it's, I think, worth working and laboring on that technique, because it allows us to communicate with each other. And I don't want to get all preachy on you, but one of the things that's happening in our world is we're not communicating with each other, and it's having rather dire results. So you decide if it's worth learning this stuff or not. That's up to you. Again, you're adults, this is college, and I'm not your mother. But I want to say to you that, at least to my mind and heart, this is a lot more important than it appears at the first, and a lot more worth spending some time and effort on. All right, so I'm going to stop and get these up for you, and then watch for the little exercise and the discussions this week. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.